Aston's Aliyah Chronicles. That was a reminder that we're recording, everyone. Hello. I'm waiting for people to take their seats. So I'm just looking at the attendees taking their seats. But while you are, welcome to Aston's Aliyah Chronicles. This is a first in a three-part series of webinars that we're putting on with various partners. Um, really about Aliyah. People essentially who are making Aliyah from the UK or looking to make Aliyah or considering Aliyah, flirting with the idea of Aliyah, anything. Um, we the first today we're discussing careers. So how do I leave my career in the UK and pick up and go to Israel? Where do I start? What do I need to be aware of? Things like that. So I'm going to for like 2 more minutes for people to take their seats, and then I think we'll kickstart. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I know it's midday in the UK. It's 2 o'clock here in Israel. Um, this is the first in a three-part series of webinars, Assassin's Aliyah Chronicles, which really discusses the kind of various elements in consideration when you make Aliyah. My name is Francesca. I run the marketing at Assassin, which is an English law firm. We practice English law with our biggest office in Tel Aviv. So we are basically comprised full of olim, mostly from the UK, but also from around the world. Um, this webinar discusses careers. So it really we're going to be discussing how do I leave my career in the UK and make Aliyah? Can I commute? How do I find a job in Israel once I've left the UK? And what I first think is quite important for me to say is that, as everyone is probably very aware, we're in the middle of a war. And so therefore, everybody on this panel is located in Israel. And therefore, at any given moment, we could experience a siren or an alert. Normally, we get an alert on our phone, and then it gives us a few minutes to work out whether we need to move to our safe rooms or not, because then a siren might then precede it, and therefore there'll be like a missile and some interception or something. And so, therefore, it means that we're going to really ask you for your patience with us, because it might be at any point that we're going to be pausing and everyone just needs to wait online. But conversely, we might get an alert, and in a few minutes later, it might not actually transpire to anything. Kind of depends where we are in the country. So anyway, it's just an FYI, and hoping everyone can just bear with us. Because obviously we already had a bunch this morning, and a few of us were all from around the country here. So just yeah, bear that in mind. And like we're gonna kickstart, I think, just with everyone on the panel here is from the UK, excluding Elad, but he's not going to give us his Aliyah story because he's a real Israeli. We all came from the UK and we made Aliyah and we have different careers. So I think we'll introduce ourselves and we'll tell you a little bit about our Aliyah story each before we go into like the nitty-gritty of like, advice and things to consider. Taylor, you just go to the next slide where we've got photos. So my name is Francesca. I am the marketing director at Assassin Law Offices. We're an English law firm. We practice English law, and our largest office is in Tel Aviv. And my Aliyah story is I'm not a lawyer. I do marketing, as I said, and I made Aliyah in my 20s. I came with 5 friends. We went to Ulpan Zion. It was really fun. It was like doing Machane again, 5 months in Jerusalem. And I landed up in class with my husband. He was my husband to be. He's from South Africa, and we met and we got married. We have 2 children, and we live in Renana. So yeah, that's my Aliyah story. I came with friends. I'm still friends with them. They still live in Israel. I know one of those friends also met his wife in class at Ulpan. So it's like a very sweet Aliyah story, mine. But that's my story. I came from London. I was in my 20s. I think I had about 8 years of background in like public relations and communications. And I came here and I kind of reinvented myself a little bit, but I still do marketing comms just within the context of a law firm. So that's me. And I think I'll ask Carmel first if she wants to introduce
Sure.
herself.
Hi everyone, I'm Carmel Steiner. I'm from London, Northwest London. I've been in Israel 15 years. I came when I was 40 with two little boys and my husband, also to Renana, which, if people don't know, is a little place quite near Israel, kind of pretends to be Israel, but very Anglo community. And I am a recruitment consultant and a headhunter. I had built up a career in that field before I made Aliyah. I actually made Aliyah from Shanghai, so I've in fact relocated twice. So I feel like I've got quite good experience in terms of relocation. I'm more than happy to share that knowledge with everyone else. As a result of being here 15 years, I have changed career twice. I have been through the school system, I've been through the gap year programs, I've been through army with my kids, one's still in the army, and I've been through university processes too. So I do feel like I know Israel quite well from Olah Hadashah perspective. When I came here, I actually changed careers because it was hard to find a job in recruitment consultancy. So I've worked as an office manager, an HR manager, and a customer success manager in a startup. And then I came back to recruitment and headhunting, and I'd love to share my stories and hopefully some knowledge with you about how to get a job in Israel or how to work from the UK in Israel, you know, having a remote career. And I look forward to hearing your questions. Could pass on now, shall I
Yeah.
say, to Dahlia?
Hi, my name is Dahlia Sklar and I'm originally from North London. I'm a Henrietta Barnett schoolgirl and I made Aliyah as a young teenager, actually. My own journey began here in Israel. I was a very angry and confused teenager with no knowledge of Hebrew at all, and I actually even failed high school. I've never been very good at maths, and I arrived in Israel without any direction, wearing big Dr. Martin boots, and I didn't go to an Ulpan either, and we didn't live in a British community either. Today, Assison has kindly asked me to share my perspective on the opportunities to work here in Israel after making Aliyah and specifically focus on the legal industry. So, through the perseverance and a lot of obviously my strong family support, I managed to actually pass the British Law Society bar exam and the Israeli bar exam. And I obtained my public notary license as well and opened up my own law firm at the age of 23. Today, I manage two immigration law firms in London and Israel. And we've got a staff of around 12 Olim specializing in US, UK, and Israeli immigration. And I want to discuss with you today all of those questions that you may have. I want to really kind of focus specifically also that I'm a working mum, and I want to always say that I'm proud of that. I have three boys who will proudly serve in the IDF one day, and I think that that is something that's very fundamental to discuss in the career section of Israeli life. My advice to you today is to look at this new adventure and to look beyond the conventional routes. And when I talk in a few minutes, then I will specifically tell you about, I think, the unique skills that you need to bring to the table. I work daily on a daily basis with lots of entrepreneurs from all ages and backgrounds, and I always look to see their passion and dedication to looking for their potential. So I'm looking forward to this speech today, and I think we'll pass it on to Constantine.
Italia. Very nice to see you all. My name's Constance Rubin, and I made Aliyah very recently, just back in November. I'm an employment solicitor at Assison, and as Francesca explained, so Assison is kind of does practices English law. So I've been able to continue my career as a lawyer, and make Aliyah. So a bit about my Aliyah story. This time last year, in April last year, I was coming out to Israel with my husband. He was running the full Jerusalem marathon. I was running the half marathon. We were with our families, and we were coming out on a flight. Um, and a family friend who knew that we were considering making Aliyah, but that I had some reservations given that I didn't know if I'd be able to continue my career as a lawyer. He was on our flight and he said, "There's someone that I want to introduce you to, and it's at the law firm Assison." It just so happened, coincidentally, that the managing partner, who was the person he wanted to introduce me to, was on that flight. So I got introduced in the aisle of that flight, and it turned into a conversation at Assassin's offices. And that then turned later down the line, a couple of months later, when I decided, let's do it. Um, we had, a further conversation over Zoom. I had a number of interviews, met with HR, and I got the job. So for me, it was kind of part of an unlock, knowing that I could continue to be a lawyer and make Aliyah. And it's been one of the best decisions we've made. We made it with our dog and our cat. So instantly we felt at home. I also wanted to share that I made Aliyah 20 weeks pregnant and started a new job being pregnant. So that may be something that you think there's never a good time to make Aliyah, but as Dahlia kind of touched on, actually, Israel is an incredibly family friendly working culture, and Assassin's been hugely supportive. So, yeah, we can always have more conversations and answer any questions about that later on in the Q&A.
Thanks, Constance. I think it leaves us with Shimon.
Hi everyone. Good afternoon. My name's Shimon Vogel. I was born and bred in Edgware, northwest London. I went to Rosh Pinna and then to Hasmonean High School, which I'm sure some of you may have heard of. Was also very involved in B'nai Akiva, which in fact is where I met my now wife. We took camp together nearly 20 years ago now. I made Aliyah just under 10 years ago with my wife and my three kids at the time, who were 6, 4, and 2 at the time, and they're now nearly 16, 14, and 12. And I've lived in Modi'in that whole time. Again, similar to Ranana, very much a very Anglo bubble. Lots of Israelis here, but a lot of Anglo English speaking people here. And I've had two more kids since being in Israel, now aged 8 and 6. All boys, so similar. It sounds like we've got lots of boys on the panel. Maybe I think Francesca might have girls, but lots of boys on the panel. Lots of boy children, I mean. I'm an accountant. I specialize in UK tax. Started my career at BDO in London in Baker Street and qualified there as an accountant, chartered accountant and tax advisor. And I was there for 8 years before making Aliyah. And then I actually continued to sit similar-ish to what Constance was saying. I continued but even more so, I continued in my existing UK role doing UK tax work for BDO and commuted for a week a month. And I did this for 2 years. Around 4 years, I've had a couple of other UK tax roles in between, but around 4 years ago, I moved to work with Forvis Mazars in Israel. Forvis Mazars, you've probably heard of, is a big global accountancy tax and advisory firm. Moved there 4 years ago, and I still do UK tax work for Forvis Mazars in Israel, but with Israeli clients who have UK tax needs. So usually it's UK subsidiary companies. So yeah, I'm happy on this webinar to give my perspective on Aliyah and if there's a need to commute, and then specifically around this sort of accountancy and finance industry.
Thank you. Thanks, Shimon. Thank you, everybody. So what we're going to do is, obviously, we could talk about everything and anything. So what we decided is we put a poll to the audience. So if the audience would like to participate in the poll, Haley, will you get it up, please? So we've got the poll, and everyone can, if the audience can participate, so we can see how we're going to order what we're going to talk about. Okay. I can't see the results though. So hold on. Taylor, can you tell us which got the highest votes? Because I can't see the back end.
Yeah, only 75% have voted.
Okay. What's the first
Uh,
subject?
so the first subject is salary expectations in Israel.
Okay, cool. Jump
The
right
next
into it, I
one,
guess.
the next one is understanding international commuting and tax benefits.
Okay.
Common challenges when starting a career in Israel. Finding a job in Israel. Preparing documents before moving. Hebrew and employment opportunities. Converting professional qualifications. And then first steps when considering Aliyah.
Okay, so yeah, let's do the first one that came up top in the poll, which is salary expectations, please. I think that's Carmel. Is that right, Carmel? You're going to talk about salary expectations.
I can certainly try to. Obviously, I'm doing this blind. I've got absolutely no idea what careers people are currently in or what careers they're currently looking for. And obviously, there's a huge range of salaries depending on what careers people have. So, I can talk about a few specific industries if that would help, or if people want to jump in and say what industries they're in, that would also help. The first thing I would say is you can't compare light with light. You can't compare Israeli salaries with British salaries. It's like comparing apples and pears. So it's just you need to be realistic about the current industry that you're in and the type of job that you want. So, for example, if you are looking for a career as, I don't know, an account executive, or you might call it a business development executive in a tech firm or a global international financial company, there's a range of salaries, and obviously it's going to be based on a basic salary and a commission. I'd say starting salaries could be anywhere from between 13,000 shekels a month. Everything's done monthly here. You don't talk about annual salaries, you talk about monthly salaries. So anything from 13,000 to, I don't know, 20,000 as basic earnings plus commission, which could take you up another 10 or 20,000. That's just one industry. If you're looking to be, I don't know, an executive assistant or an office assistant, something like that. You could be looking at anything from 12,000 to 20,000. It's a very difficult question to answer without knowing what industry sectors people are in and what professions they are. So there's a huge range. And if people want to ask me privately afterwards about their specific situation, I'd be more than happy to talk to them. I think there's a slide later on in this deck, Francesca, correct me if I'm wrong, which looks at different industry sectors and where people are in their career, if they're in the first couple of years or 6 years in or whatever, which gives you a bit of a better idea. So I'm
There
conscious
is.
that I'm
Tina,
being a
will you
little
just
bit
show
vague.
the audience? Yeah, there is. This just gives you a snapshot, but it because it's very hard to obviously, as Carmel said, be specific.
So just bear in mind that salaries here are always quoted monthly in shekel, but they don't talk about it annually, and they're just huge ranges. So please be in touch with me afterwards if you want to know about your specific sector, and I can do my best to answer your question.
And also, you can send in questions. I can see two people already have in the Q&A, and we'll address them at the end. So we're not ignoring you. I know there's two, so we'll come to them at the end. So don't you can throw anyone else can throw them in while we're going. What's the next one, Taylor? Is it finding a job in Israel?
Yeah.
So I think that might be me again. Finding a job in Israel. This is a brilliant question. Um, If you're already working in a specific company in the UK, I would highly recommend you looking to see if there's any possibility of you continuing to do that job remotely from Israel. Many people do, many people commute. It is a done thing. That would be the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is network, network, network. It is the key to finding a job in Israel, much, much more so than in the UK. It's a very relationship driven market. So, networking, building a community, building your community of people in your field, find out about people who are working in a similar field in Israel, talk to them. People expect to do it. There's no kind of politeness like there is in the UK of, oh, I don't know if I should approach that person. Just connect with people, WhatsApp them, message them. Everyone's always very happy to help everybody. Networking is the key thing. LinkedIn is going to be your best friend if it isn't already. There's a huge amount of emphasis on companies utilizing LinkedIn to find staff here. So I definitely would get myself au fait with LinkedIn, put on those job alerts for whatever field it is that you're in. and make your CV specific to the Israeli job market. People want to know, what can you do? What do you want to do? Summarize your experience in a profile. Don't write at the top of your CV, I'm a team-oriented, organized, whatever you are. Yes, of course you are. Tell me, as a recruiter, I want to know, what have you done? What do you want to do? How are you going to do it? So tailor your CV to the Israeli market. Those are the key things I would say. Network, network, network. It's the first place to start.
Oh, Mel, thank you. It's true. Everyone, it's just about who you know here. Like, you just have to schmooze, basically. What's
Can
the
I
next one?
just add there that I think that people that are interested and they have a job in mind and they've seen something, I think that a lot of the time they need to adapt their CV specifically for that job. We get so many CVs for specific positions that we're posting, but the CV may be something from like 2 or 3 years ago. It's not really relevant to what they're doing. I think that CVs need to be very individualized. We always like to have a letter kind of that explains a little bit about why you think you are suitable and something very personal as well. So it's very, maybe it's not typical in the UK, but here you kind of do try to personalize yourself to that position. And I also think that a lot of the time, I'd like to say here that if people don't actually find that specific job that they can do in their practice, then they need to think about converting their qualification. And I mean, I think there's actually somebody here on the webinar who's already asked me how to convert a license as an insolvency practitioner who's licensed under the JIEB in the UK. So I looked for that, and that position doesn't even exist in Israel because only that position could be practiced by a licensed lawyer or a certified practiced accountant here in Israel. So I think that that's okay that it's not transferable, but you have to think about adaptability. So, for example, we have an Argentinian litigation lawyer who made Aliyah in our law firm. That obviously in Israel she has nothing to do and she can't obviously practice with her level of Hebrew, even though that's her passion. So she has pivoted over to dealing with something completely different, found a niche in something different, utilizing her Spanish and her English. But that's where she's transferred her skills, and I think that's something that's very important to you thinking about your future coming into the country.
I would definitely second that. Please do tailor your CVs to each job. It's just very frustrating to receive a CV that is totally irrelevant to the. We're not psychic, so definitely tailor your CV. I 100% agree with that. And also, just to reiterate what Dahlia said, flexibility and versatility are the name of the game. That is one of the key things about being successful here. You need to have a certain level of amenability and versatility and think outside the box. You might not be able to translate exactly what you're doing in the UK to a job in Israel. Don't worry about it. Just be adaptable, versatile, and open to suggestion.
Thank you. The next one is common challenges and starting a career in Israel. I think that's Constance.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Francesca. So one of the common challenges I think people face when they are starting a new career and they've just made Aliyah is not having enough time before. So after you land, after you make Aliyah, and before you start your job, there's a huge, huge number of things to do just from an administration perspective, like getting your Israeli ID documents, getting into the healthcare system, setting up a new bank account, finding a flat, doing all of those sorts of things. So people that I've spoken to at Asson who kind of started a job immediately had definitely said that it was quite full on in terms of obviously there are all of the challenges when you do start a new job in terms of wanting to make a good first impression, wanting to kind of be available. And of course, if you didn't have the time, let's say a couple of weeks before you were able to start your job, I'm sure, it was very much made clear to me if I've had any outstanding appointments or anything, work was very flexible if I needed to take time off to kind of attend those. But Definitely from my experience, obviously it was all quite recently. I did find it very exhausting going to all of the different appointments. There's a lot of things that you have to remember to take with you. And I'm sure we'll talk about some of that, later on in the webinar, but just having enough time to kind of acclimatize and to give yourself time, I think, then will make you, when you do start your new job, have the best kind of starting point. Another common challenge, I think, is trying to juggle learning Hebrew and doing Ulpan classes while also continuing with your job. So for me, it was something that I was very upfront about with my boss, and said I wanted to do Ulpan. There were Ulpan classes in the evening, twice a week, from 5:30 to 8:30. And very supportive again. I made clear that if there was anything urgent, I would be able to miss Ulpan, turn up late to it, and otherwise would be happy to kind of turn up to work early to make up the hours, but to try and kind of keep that going, keeping a level going. So it also helped for me starting to do online Ulpan through Citizen Cafe when I was in the UK. So at least I came to Israel with a kind of basic knowledge of Hebrew. Another common challenge, and it's funny to hear, different people talk about these things, is the cultural differences. So whereas in the UK, so I was working at a London-based law firm, I would find that there was quite a big barrier between people's personal and professional life. Whereas here in Israel, I would find that generally it's much more kind of bring your whole self to work. People are keen to get to know you. People are keen to get to know your other half. So, for example, there was a recent event where we were celebrating within our business law team somebody's recent marriage, and all plus ones were invited. So we all went out for a meal, and it was a really nice opportunity to kind of get to know everyone. I think sometimes people can find it a challenge if they are unable to establish that boundary between work and their personal life. And one of the ways, for example, that I've kind of set up is, so often people communicate via WhatsApp, but actually having a WhatsApp business number as opposed to just your WhatsApp personal number can help. And then the final one that I wanted to touch on is working on a Sunday, and also the difference in time if you're still working with UK clients. So obviously it takes some adjustment. And even when I speak to people who've made Aliyah, 20 years ago, they still say that the one thing that they really miss is their Sunday if they work on a Sunday. And actually, for me, it's one of the things that I quite like doing, because actually work tends to be quieter in the sense that clients are not emailing you if you're working with UK-based clients, and you can really get your head down and kind of get on with things. Also at Aston, it's like a day where you work from home, so that can have kind of positive things to it. And in terms of time differences, I'd still say I'm not quite used to it. So the other day, I was in the employment tribunal, and I logged on 2 hours early, and I couldn't work out why the judge and the claimant hadn't turned up yet. And it was because I was 2 hours early. So that also takes a bit of time getting used to. So kind of in summary, I think the key things are to have an open mind, to new ways of working, to new ways of communicating, be flexible. And in terms of how you can be kind to yourself, give yourself space and time. There's a huge amount of differences, but it's kind of riding the wave, and it's all worth it.
I think I would just add in there about the challenges that lots of families consider that maybe one of the challenges is their young children, that the difficulties that they're going to have to go through once they come here. I mean, I came here as a teenager, and I probably gave my mother a lot of hell. But I know that younger children, they adapt very, very quickly. But I think that I would like to mention specifically for those that do have young children, that actually in Israel we have something which is called a misrat em, or a mother's position. And I just want to say that it's probably quite unique here in Israel, this recognized employment framework. And under Israeli labor practice, a parent, which is usually traditionally the mother, but it's increasingly now by law also applicable to fathers. So, if you have young children, you are entitled to request shortened working hours. And the essence behind it is because both parents usually work in Israel, and hence the government usually has an incentive to help them figure out how to raise the family at the same time as working. So it kind of promotes this. And that will be that you will ask you'll explain to your employer that you have young children. It's usually younger than the age of 12. And then they'll probably reduce your hours from 8.5 to 9 hours a day to around 6 hours. So usually finishing around 3:30. And that will just allow you to rush out of work quickly and go and pick up the kids from GAN or from kindergarten between 4 to 4:30. And I just wanted to specifically say that it's not an automatic universal right in every job, but it's so widely recognized throughout all the workplaces here in Israel that it's completely acceptable. Even some of the positions they will write, this is a position promoting for mothers. And also, I think that it allows you to enjoy and benefit from life, hanging out with your children in the playground in the afternoon, and being a working parent at exactly at the same time. And also, just to mention that many of the big tech firms promote parents and children at the same time, so much so that, for example, in the Chofesh, in Pesach or Rosh Hashanah, they will offer specific childcare free sometimes in a creche in the actual office. A lot of the times, for example, now we're at war, so they'll actually give your employee a voucher so you can pay a babysitter so that you can actually get to work. And also, I'll mention this a bit later in more detail, but you'll actually get tax credits from the Bituach Leumi, which is the national insurance, for the fact that you actually are a working mum and also that you have children and that you're an oleh. And that actually specifically really works into actually money in your pocket at the end of the day.
And if I can just add, following on from that, that Aliyah is absolutely right. If you are thinking about making Aliyah and you've got young children, come when they are young. It is so much easier. I came when mine was 7 and 9, and they just fit in. The older they are, and the longer you leave it, the more difficult it is, and the more challenges I think you'll have. So, from a personal perspective, if you're thinking of coming, come sooner rather than later.
Great, thank you. And the next one, Taylor, is the commuting stuff, which I think is Shimon's.
Yes, yeah. Just to echo also what Carmel and Dahlia said, I also came with sort of youngest children, and it was obviously hard. It's always hard right at the beginning, but they settled in very quickly. And yeah, now they're sort of real sort of typical Israeli, still with a bit of British culture, hopefully in there somewhere. But yeah, they really are. They really enjoy the independence and everything, all the positive things about being in Israel. So yeah, I think it's good to come younger if possible, only if possible, obviously. Yeah, just to touch on a few of sort of UK tax aspects, and as I mentioned in my sort of intro on the Aliyah story, I for the first couple of years after I made Aliyah, I was doing quite a bit of commuting back to the UK. And there's obviously being a tax accountant, there's obviously tax impacts, tax things to think about from a tax perspective that I thought would be helpful to share in case anyone else commutes, and also just general tax implications of Aliyah at a very high level. Obviously, anyone that has any other questions can reach out afterwards. But just in terms of that commuting point, to start with that. So I think it's important to ensure you're sort of considering your personal tax position, because what you probably want to avoid is when you leave the UK, you want to sort of lose that UK tax residency, because that means you then no longer have to pay any tax in the UK, or I'll get onto that in a bit later. There might be some tax you have to pay, but as a general thing, in terms of your sort of salaried income, you won't be paying any tax in the UK. That's based on a tax residence test, which is generally the main elements of that are days physically in the UK and certain ties to the UK. So yeah, it's important to sort of make sure you don't remain UK tax resident. If you do commute or work overseas, there'll also be the benefit of the 10-year Aliyah exemption, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard of. So that is either on passive income, so things like rent or dividends, or on what's called active income earned overseas. So that basically means when you're not in Israel, so let's say you're working, 2 months a year from the UK, then for those 2 months you won't need to pay any income tax in Israel, and you won't be paying any income tax in the UK as well, as long as you stay non-UK tax resident. So that's a very good benefit, and it's something that I've benefited from over the years. I'm nearly done because I'm nearly at my 10 years. Um, Elad will also mention, I'm sure you've all heard of the new rules that are hopefully coming in. They're pretty much in, and they're going to be coming in very soon around no tax in your first few years after making Aliyah. So that will obviously mean you don't have to worry about the point I was talking about, but that is 10 years anyway, so that will last for a lot longer in terms of that other income tax exemption. But yeah, we'll talk about that in a bit more detail a bit later on as well. A few other UK tax impacts just to mention, just as sort of helpful tips for people that are not sort of so heavily involved in tax like I am. So one is when you leave the UK, you should tell HMRC you're no longer resident and submit what's called a P85. So you can Google it. It's a very easy online form, and it basically tells HMRC that you've left the UK, and usually that results in you getting a personal tax refund because the personal allowance is essentially split over a year. But if you come in the middle of a UK tax year, then you essentially due a refund. So I think pretty much everyone ends up getting anyone in employment ends up getting a refund of sorts from the UK tax authorities. Um, Also, just so you know, you don't, as I mentioned a bit earlier, you don't need to file a tax once you leave the UK. You won't need to file a tax return in the UK unless you have any UK sourced income. So, for example, rental income from a property. It's not like the US where you have to, if you're a US citizen, you have to keep filing um, US tax returns. One other point to mention, if you do remain on UK payroll, so let's say you stay in a UK job and you're on a UK payroll, it's important to make sure they set you up as a non-resident, like a non-NT tax code or 0T tax code in the UK, which basically means you won't be paying UK taxes because you're physically not in the UK anymore, and instead you'll file a tax return here and pay taxes in Israel or not, depending on where you're at in terms of those new Israeli tax rules. Um, I've got also some things to talk about around accounting, specifically accounting and finance. But I think if anyone has any questions, because it's probably not going to be relevant for everyone on the call, let me know if anyone has any questions on that, and also around converting licenses, because as I've said, I did not do that. I've only got UK accountancy and tax qualifications, but I know I've got colleagues who've transferred to Israeli qualifications, and from what I understand, although it's hard, it's very doable, and there's a lot of support for New Olim as well in doing that.
If I can jump in and talk actually on that side of the taxes about if you're working in Israel and you're actually a salaried employee. So I just wanted to give a little bit of an explanation about how you are taxed at the end of your month on your salary for your social benefits. And I think this could be something that's quite interesting. And many people don't really understand it at the very beginning, and they just receive a salary slip from their employer. And there are lots of words, they're all in Hebrew, and there's perhaps an accountancy firm that, you have to go and deal with them and tackle with them. You've got no idea what's written there. So I just kind of wanted to mention a few issues there. Basically, what you need to understand is there's something called Nukudot Zikui, or credit points. And I'll just very, very briefly talk about it because it's quite interesting. So it often surprises the UK professionals when they actually arrive in Israel, because this can actually make a real difference to what you take home in your salary. Your salary, you're taxed for national insurance, for health insurance, and your employer has to dedicate a certain amount for social benefits. But these benefits are not just a percentage, they're reduced by credit points. And you'll actually see it listed on your payslip. And each credit point in 2026 now is worth around 270 shekels a month off your tax. That's around £65 approximately. So if you have 5 points, that's already around 1,400 shekels that you will be taxed less each single month. And here, this is where it actually becomes really interesting. Every Israeli citizen who is an employee automatically gets 2.25 points of credits. Women who work, in order to promote women to go out and work, will receive extra, and we receive 2.75 points. So that already reduces your tax that you need to pay every month by around 600 shekels a month before anything. So it could be that you and your husband actually make exactly the same salary, but you as the wife may be bringing in more because you pay less tax. As a new Oleh, or as a new immigrant, you can receive an additional 3 points on top of that in the first 2 years. So that means you're saving approximately another 1,500 points, shekels each month off your salary, off your tax that you need to pay. And if you're a parent on top of that, you can actually, for each child that you get, you can actually get even more credit points. So you can actually even receive up to 10 credit points, tax points, which will probably even reduce your tax that you need to pay on your monthly salary by around 450 pounds a month. So if the average salary is around 14,000 shekels a month in Israel, your net income could completely change to and will be around 20% less. So it is critical. I actually had a conversation with one of my employees she's an Ola Chadasha from Canada. And we were actually chatting in the bomb shelter, and I asked her if she actually had done this, and she said she had no idea about this, and that now she realized she had to go back to the accountant and ask him retroactively for a year to give her back money, which is obviously much, much harder than actually on day one when you fill out your form. The form is called the TOFES 101, or the 101 form, which means that you start working. You have to know to mark, I am an immigrant, I am a woman, I have 3 children. And at that point, then you need to check that that is done correctly. A lot of the firms, they just send out the form and they just say, I filled it out for you, just sign there. You can start tomorrow. You don't actually know what's gone in there, and that will be actually relaying how much tax you will be deducted every month.
Can I just jump in there on the point Dahlia said about making sure that you check forms that are filled out, especially if they're filled out for you. So when my husband and I made Aliyah, you go to the special office and you have to show all of your proof of Jewish background. And one of the things they ask you is to confirm your address. And so the person who was filling out our form filled out the wrong address, which we didn't realize. And it just said that the area that we live in, although that in itself is actually a road name. So it only transpired later when we were trying to open a bank account, and weeks had gone past and we didn't receive our credit cards and our debit cards, that we realized that the wrong address had been put down on our temporary ID card. And it then meant that we had to go through a whole process of changing our address, which was fine because we had a lease for our flat as proof of our address. Anyway, it's one of those things that's really easy to miss, particularly because forms are done in Hebrew. But make sure you do follow up and check, because it caused all kinds of problems across all kinds of different administrative bodies that we had to go and rectify afterwards.
Thank you. Thank you, Dahlia and Constance and Shimon. The next on the poll was preparing documents before moving. So I think that's over to Dahlia.
Right. Okay. So I'm not going to specifically talk about obviously all of the different industries, but obviously I can focus on the legal industry and I'll talk about that. I think that the most important thing that you need to ensure is that you have original certificates of everything, a police clearance, an updated police clearance, and if you belong to an organization or register, for example, the Law Society, that you also get what's called a letter of good standing. All of these documents should be certified with a stamp from the institution called the apostille, which you can either find somebody online to help you do that in the UK, or you can just send it off to legalized office, and they'll send you back that document. In Israel, 95% of the organizations will accept your documents in English. So you don't actually have to translate them into Hebrew. But there could be organizations that would specifically want you to have that translated. And then that would also need to be certified by a notary. So, for example, I know with psychologists that they want to register here in Israel, or even a lot of the times teachers that come to register as teachers in different schools here through the education system, that they do actually require the documents to be translated into Hebrew. So, maybe it's just better that you do that, or you have one set of English and one set of Hebrew. I absolutely recommend that you come with all of your original birth certificates for you, for your children, and even if you could get 2 or 3 originals of the same. You may need it down the line if you're going to apply for a renewal of a passport, or if maybe you need to register your children into school and they're going to ask for that. Definitely go and get all of your medical doctor vaccination slips, and go to your local GP and get an update of your medical situation, especially for children. When you register for the health providers in Israel, we have 4 different health providers that you can choose which one you want to go to. But once you go and you choose which one, Maccabi, Clalit, then they will ask to see your vaccination and your little book, and perhaps even a letter from the doctor. So as I said, I think the degrees you could probably keep in English, unless it's in a specific industry that maybe they would prefer that to be in Hebrew. And I think that every job that or every industry that you have, there is an organization or a ministry in charge of that. Usually just go onto the ministry website, and there'll usually be an English site, and they'll explain to you about your conversion. If you find any difficulty in anything, send me an email and I'll be happy to help you with that. But I definitely say prepare a long time in advance for these things, because that actually takes quite a long time. As I said at the beginning, I will focus actually on the legal area, obviously, because that's my speciality. There are several concessions in certain professions, such as the legal, or sometimes in the medical, that they may have conversion. And I also think also with the accountancy, they do have conversion. And I'm not going to go into specifics except for for foreign trained lawyers. In Israel, you have something which is called a registered foreign trained lawyer. They can actually continue to practice foreign law in Israel simply by registering as a foreign licensed lawyer with the Israeli Bar Society. They can advise only on the foreign law of their country, but you cannot appear in an Israeli court. And you'll have to have an active foreign license with your insurance from the British Law Society, for example. To apply for this at the Israeli bar, you'll have to have an updated police clearance from within the last 6 months, and as I said before, a good standing certificate with an apostille stamp on it, and you'll pay a fee. Now, otherwise, if you don't want to just remain a foreign lawyer in Israel, you can actually start the conversion. And the conversion to become an Israeli license, you'll have to pass something called the Dinei Yisrael. It's an ethics exam, and you'll have to complete a shortened internship rather than the regular one. If you've practiced abroad outside of Israel for less than 5 years, then you will need to do a full internship, or we call it stage, in a registered law firm here in Israel, and you'll have to sit the Israeli bar exam in Hebrew. You may get a concession with extra time to sit the exam, but it will all be in Hebrew, and I can say it's very difficult. Today, it is common to find many law firms such as Assassin's as registered foreign law firms in Israel with a branch. There are numerous American law firms. There are numerous American accountancy firms here in Israel. and they allow foreign solicitors to practice British law or the law of their home country in Israel, but they are not considered Israeli lawyers. And I probably would say that although there are jobs available for foreigners without an Israeli license, maybe having that additional certification can definitely open many more doors. For example, if you do want to join an Israeli firm or become partner in an Israeli firm, you will need to have an Israeli license, and that will help you climb up on the corporate ladder in the future.
Just to jump in really quickly on that, just because we were talking about that, on the accountancy side, so as Dalia was saying, there's a much shortened 6 month period sort of internship that's needed. And for instead of 15 exams, there are 4 exams to convert to a license, something, as I've said, I haven't done, but I know many others that have. And as Dalia said, it's more likely to open, many more job opportunities in the present and the future by doing so. So yeah, it is a lot. It's not easy, obviously, but it's a lot easier than doing it from scratch. You'll only have 4 exams rather than the 15 to convert your UK accountancy license to an Israeli one.
I just want to add one thing, that it's definitely worth you bringing plenty of evidence that you actually worked for over 5 years as a solicitor abroad. Don't think, oh, just bring the basic end of year pay slip and that will be enough. The Israeli Bar Law Society will require a lot of evidence, and a lot of the time they don't accept it. And so it's better for you to bring obviously more than less. I would bring a reference letter from my employer, and I would bring obviously the set of annual pay slips. But the most important thing is to show that you are actually working as a solicitor abroad. I've had many cases where foreign lawyers have come to me and said, I definitely worked, but I don't know how to prove that from 5 years ago. How do I do it? So start to prepare a big portfolio beforehand, copies of files that you've submitted, copies of cases that you submitted, these kind of things you'll put together.
Great. I think that on that topic, it would be natural for us to discuss Hebrew. I know that we've actually got a question through the Q&A about the importance of Hebrew in employment. So let's talk about Hebrew. I don't know, is
I can talk about Hebrew. I can talk
yeah.
about it's very, very, very helpful. That's what I would say. It's not to say you will not get a job if you don't have Hebrew. You will. The Israeli market is rich in opportunities, especially in high tech, in fintech, in the global organizations. But Hebrew will undoubtedly open doors for you, and it just makes life here much easier. And I'm saying that as somebody who doesn't speak very well and has to rely on her husband and children all the time. So if you have the opportunity to learn Hebrew before you come, and then to do an all-pan like Constance says in the evenings when you're working, I would highly, highly recommend it. But don't let it be a barrier to you coming. If you want to come, you will, and you want to make it work, you will make it work. And one can learn Hebrew if they really want to. But it's not going to be a factor that says, no, I'm not going to get a job, but it will help you, definitely.
And it's also important to note that English is obviously very helpful. On the flip side, a lot of jobs
Absolutely.
will very much like it that you speak English fluently and can obviously write in English. So that's obviously a plus side for Olim coming.
Very much so. And especially in the global firms and in the tech firms, they need people who speak English without sounding Israeli. So especially like in if you're doing copywriting and things like that. So you can use your English as a selling point, and giving yourself one step ahead in the market. So absolutely.
Yeah, I would just add to that I think that coming and just saying I speak English is one thing, but coming and saying I am a professional that works in a high level of English, I can draft, high level language letters, that actually will give you definitely a boost. But even if you are in a fully English department and everybody around you does understand you, sitting in the boardroom around everyone and having that little banter kind of beforehand, speaking in Hebrew, just makes you part of more of the team. going into the coffee room and taking the some milk in the morning kind of thing, and knowing which milk is which kind of thing, because you'll open the fridge and you'll have 15 types of milks, and you'll be able to read, is that, the vegan, the soy, the vanilla, the almond and all that. That definitely helps. And I think as somebody that, I mean, I came with no Hebrew at all and I had to battle through. Even if you make stupid mistakes, Israelis, they may be quite, difficult on the outside, but they love it when you really try to speak in Hebrew, and they will try to help you, especially if you kind of say to your colleague, look, I just really need to get my Hebrew a little bit brushed up. They will definitely try. They'll call you in the morning, hi, boker tov, manishma, and they'll try us. I think that's important for the workplace. And on the personal side of things, I think as you've got young children also coming out of GAN, running up to you, saying, Mum, Mum, at some point they also say to you, and especially if you're not only in a UK, British location that you live for kind of thing, they may say to you, Mum, can you speak to me in Hebrew next to my friends? Because I'm embarrassed. I don't want you to speak to me just in English. And so, I get that quite a lot with my kids, even though I try just to speak to them just in English all the time. But they love it that, obviously I can transfer over to Hebrew just so that they're not embarrassed when their friends are there. So I think that you're coming here, you need to make the effort, integrate. It doesn't have to be at the best, highest level, but just show that you're willing to go the whole way.
Great. And I think we're just going to go. I think the last thing we'll do is pensions and employment benefits, because there's quite a lot of questions that come through. I think everyone in the panel wants to address the questions because they're very important. So I think Elan is going to talk about pensions and employment benefit, employer benefit. I don't know, we lost Elan. Is he not here?
He's gone off.
He's gone off. Okay, fine. So should we just go into the questions? If he comes back, we can go in. Should we go to the first question? Anonymous attendee, which is fine. For recent graduates, should one start their careers in the UK or Israel if you're optimizing for salary and training exposure?
It depends. I would say, if you're coming straight as a graduate, why not throw yourself straight into the Israeli job market? If it's going to be easier because you can only speak English, then obviously try and go into a global firm. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. It's going to be a case by case situation, and it depends what opportunities are open to you. Whatever you do, it's going to be a step in the right direction of your career ladder. So I would see what the opportunities are and not limit yourself by deciding whether it's Israeli or global.
I think I would also add here that a graduate in the UK may be, aged around what, 21, 22, 23. So at the average 21, 22, 23-year old in Israel would be maybe just coming out the army at that point, even before studying. I think the average age of going to actually start studying here in Israel is around 23, 24. So you actually, if you decide to come in at that age and start, you get yourself a much bigger advantage over other Israelis, even in that market where you're kind of competing with that job, and you will get, a couple more years in there before them. I really think that that's a good opportunity to take. Apart from that as well, obviously you got the fact that what you have studied yesterday doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be using it tomorrow. I mean, we know that from even like the tech industry now, with AI kind of taking over so much, that actually maybe what you spent 2 or 3 years working in the UK, is that even going to help you now? So I would just say, if your reason for coming to Israel is for your specific passion to come and live here in Israel, then you will find a job. You will be able to work hard if you look for it. I wouldn't put that as something to defer your move.
And in addition, there are many additions. I would say if you're coming as a recent graduate in your early 20s, I personally would highly recommend you consider potentially volunteering in the army, because being in the army is very, very, very well regarded by potential employers later down the line. if you haven't done the army, people ask why. And it might be you can explain, oh, I came as a Lahadashah or Lahadash or whatever, but do consider it and don't think you'll necessarily be a combat soldier because you won't. There are more non-combat positions than there are combat positions. It's very, very, very well regarded to have done the army. So just another thing to put into the mix.
Okay, the next question is, could you address salary to cost of living relationship in comparison to London, for say, in accountancy? I think that's probably for Shimon.
Hi, yes. I mean, I would say, to be fair, I mean, again, it depends a lot on where you're living, right? Because there are lots of places in Israel, for example, Tel Aviv, which the cost of living is very high. But there are also lots of places in Israel where the cost of living is low. I mean, generally, obviously, the English-speaking communities tend to be a little bit higher as a general in terms of the cost of living. Salaries, and I think it was sort of addressed in that table, they're definitely higher in the UK than they are in Israel as a general thing. But again, the exchange rate's also helping on that because the pound is weak against the shekel, as I'm sure you're all aware of. So yeah, I do think there is an element of, I do think it's a little bit tougher in Israel compared to the UK in terms of that balance. But as has been mentioned a lot across the webinar, there's lots of benefits also in Israel, which you wouldn't necessarily see particularly around the tax side of things in Israel, especially with young children as being an Oleh, that you wouldn't see in the UK. So overall, you might be in a, you might be, and also you get another point to note, you get child benefit in Israel no matter how much you earn, whereas I know in the UK it's sort of means tested, isn't it? So that's another point, you can get sort of quite a decent amount of on top of those tax credits that Dalia and everyone has mentioned. You also get child benefit where no matter how much you earn, so there's that as well. So there are additional benefits in Israel, I'd say, compared to the UK. But yeah, I'm not no by no means trying to say you're sort of doing better off in Israel, but I think it sort of bridges the gap quite a lot.
Okay, we've spoken about speaking Hebrew. I think we addressed that earlier. Dalia, you mentioned the shortened hours for mothers, particularly, or parents that leave, early for pickup or whatever. So someone's asked, if you work shortened hours, does the pay get reduced pro rata? I think that's what this question is asking.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. But so either the actual position will specify what the salary is, and they'll specifically say this is suitable for a mother, and then you'll read into that. In the interview, it's very acceptable for you just to say, look, I've got 3 children. You can say that, it's fine. Legally, by law, the employer is not allowed to ask if you have children, but you can offer that information, and they won't take that, or hold that against you. And obviously, you can ask what the salary is at that time. I just want to mention also something of what, like Shimon mentioned before, about living in different areas. If you are thinking, for example, of going into the tech industry. First of all, they've got huge kind of tech hubs in all around Israel. So even, for example, if you decide, actually, I want to go and look at working for Intel, I mean, that's located in Beersheba. And if you can be living in Beersheba, obviously the salary for working in something like that is going to be very high, and the living is actually much less, obviously, in Beersheba. If you decide you want to live actually in the green areas of the north, which are beautiful near even Benjamin or Zichron, you've got, Haifa, which is very close, which you've got IBM, you've got Checkpoint, you've got Nvidia, you've got huge companies, obviously, all around in these areas. You don't actually have, I mean, Tel Aviv, without a doubt, absolutely amazing, loving, sitting on, Rothschild's 11 in the morning on your laptop, walking your dog. Nobody's asking you any questions, but it is a very expensive city to live in. Now, thank goodness, over the past few years, obviously, we've got much better public service, transport. So we've got something which is called the Nativ Mahir, which is the fast lane from Modi'in into Tel Aviv. Really popular. You leave your car in like a big designated car park, and you get a free shuttle into Tel Aviv. You've got to get there early to find space to leave your car, but that's obviously an opportunity. Live far and then get into work. And then you've got the light railway, obviously, that travels all around as well. Very popular with the young people. So I would definitely think about kind of if you are planning to look for those jobs. I would probably say that most of the law jobs mainly are in central kind of areas, even though you do have a large hub of branches of the law firms in Jerusalem now as well. So I would have a look at those. And just lastly, I want to send that a lot of my friends even they actually have like a little sidekick on the side. So they'll have their 9 to 3. But maybe one of my best friends, for example, she actually enjoys making children's birthday cakes on the weekend. And so she has a little independent job and she makes, a few hundred shekels every weekend. And that helps her kind of think at the time that she knows that for the next few years she will definitely be working less because she's got young children.
Okay, thank you. And I think the next question, which will be for Shimon again, does your UK employer need to register as an Israeli employer?
Yes, that's a good question. Technically, yes. So really, if you're in Israel, you probably should technically be on Israeli payroll. So what companies often do, which is what I think this person's getting at, is they set up sort of a local Israeli payroll. So then you can sort of be taxed at source like you would be in the UK. What happens in practice, especially if someone's just moved from the UK and it's early days, is they just stay on UK payroll even though they're in Israel. So what will happen, and I think I alluded to that earlier. So what will happen then is you'll go on sort of a non-resident tax code in the UK, and then you have to file a tax return in Israel to pay your taxes here. But yes, technically the answer to that is yes, you should really be on a sort of local Israeli payroll if you've got someone physically working from Israel for a UK based company that has no company in Israel. But yeah, as I said, yeah, often at the beginning, especially companies just for ease, and obviously often people then move on or they start setting up a company in Israel, so then obviously there'll be a payroll. So yeah, often at the beginning people just stick on their UK payroll and just file the Israeli tax return and make sure they're not paying the tax in the UK via the tax code in the UK.
You. And I think this is for Carmel. Does university quality help employment prospects in Israel? Like if you go to Oxford or Cambridge or LSE, or like is it treated in the same way as it's in the UK? I think that's what they're trying to get at.
Um, no, I honestly don't. Obviously, it depends what job you're going for. Um, I don't think employers here generally give a flying monkeys which university you've been to. I think they're more interested in what unit you've been in the Israeli army, to be perfectly honest. Obviously, people know Oxford and Cambridge. I'm being a little bit flippant. Um, they're more interested in practical experience. Of course, one has to have the education. I'm a firm believer in as many qualifications as possible, but no, I haven't come across one employer who's judged someone on the basis of which university they went to in the UK. They're interested if they're a graduate or have got a master's or a PhD or actually more importantly an MBA. MBAs are very well thought of here, but no, sorry.
Okay, there's a few others. We're not going to answer all of them just because I'm wary of time and there are people dropping off. But I think I'll leave the next question to last because it's nice, we're a nice one to end on. But what are the average holiday entitlements? Because that's quite important.
Um,
Does
I think by law you have I think it's 14 days by law if I remember correctly. I always have to remember since I am an employer. And you can actually for we have some obviously many Jewish festivals. All of the Jewish festivals obviously nobody works during those festivals. Usually the day before the festival, so the eve of whether it's Pesach, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. The office will usually, it depends how religious the office is. So, for example, the more religious offices, they may take off like completely and just close the office the day before. As soon as the office closes, then you'll be able to take that day off. But most of the other offices, they may have like a half day where they'll let you kind of come in. Sometimes even that day you won't really work. You'll just have like a little party in the office kind of thing and then celebrate off kind of thing and then see you guys. Usually over Pesach. And Sukkot, you'll have the few days of Chol Hamoed in the middle, and they'll kind of ask you, especially as the larger firms, whether you want to replace your days of your holiday days, your vacation days, or if you want to and spend them with your family, or maybe if you want to work like half days, and then maybe a half day will be considered a whole day. So it's very, very kind of individual. I would just always ask if you're working in a larger company, then you'll have your HR, you'll go to them, they'll explain. And they don't really mess around with those kind of things because it's just the easiest thing for an employee to kind of to focus on afterwards. But if you're working for a smaller firm, then it's very kind of just, easygoing and things like that. So I think that's on one hand, and it just seems here that we're just constantly on holiday. I'm not quite sure why, but especially obviously when our children are on a holiday and we have to kind of focus on how to juggle together with the children. There was just one issue that I wanted to talk about that Shimon was talking there before about working remotely. And I also just want to bring up the idea that there is something specifically called EOR, which is Employer on Record. And that actually does allow your employer in the UK to register with a company that they will take care in Israel of all of the taxation and all of the legal side of the employment, and they can continue to work full time for their UK company. And so it's very, very popular nowadays whereby somebody wants to hire someone in a country where they haven't got an actual legal entity there. And these companies are becoming bigger and bigger. Our firm at DRSI, we partner with a company called Payoneer, and they are, excellent. Within around a week and a half, they'll have all the paperwork signed up, and the UK employer can just be completely at rest to know that his employee is now working in Israel, but all of the taxation is taken care of, and they will just send them an invoice at the end of the month, which will include the payment that they paid and any little small commission that they obviously take for the service. And we usually say, if that's your plan, obviously go to your employer and say to them, look, I found an organization that will cover everything. It's simple. You just need to sign here. I will be promoting the business when I come out to Israel. I will be your presence in the Middle East. I'll potentially be your access to the Israeli tech ecosystem. I will be able to get Israeli clients and partnerships, and obviously I'll be able to cover different hours. So it will seem like an advantage to your UK employer, and that could be a very interesting idea, and definitely staying on that payroll in the UK coming over. It's very interesting.
Thank you. I think we're going to end with the last question. And I think we thank you for all the questions. We've got 14 questions. It really means that people are engaged and it's like quite exciting. What we'll do is just I'll say it now that I'll take the questions. Some of them you're anonymous. We can't answer you independently, but we'll combine them and we'll put together a crib sheet and I'll circulate it to everyone registered for the webinar with like the summary of everything that was discussed and also just touching upon addressing the questions that were submitted so no one feels like they can't get an answer. And of course, everyone on the panel, goes without saying, are completely approachable and anyone can just drop them a line at any point. And we'll send the details of everybody with the crib sheet as well. So the last question, which really is for everybody to answer in true panel-like style. Looking back, is there something you would have done differently? We'll start with Carmel.
I love that question. No regrets, I would say. The only thing I would say is that I was a real helicopter mum coming from Northwest London, Habs girl, very hung up on my kids' education. I was very worried about them coming to Israel and what sort of education they'd get. And I quickly learned, even though they were 7 and 9, I didn't have a clue what was going on in the Israeli education system. I had no idea what they were learning. I couldn't even understand their maths questions because they were all in Hebrew. And I just wish I'd let go earlier than I did. I did let go and I realized it didn't make any difference. And not that I want to say that my kids are fabulous, because obviously they are fabulous, but they've turned out okay. And it didn't matter that I didn't understand the curriculum and I didn't understand what they were learning. They turned out all right. They're at university now and it's all fine. So just don't stress about things like that. It works out somehow. Thought I would say.
Sorry, the next person could be Shimon.
I would say perhaps not speak. So I have always been in UK jobs. Well, UK, not necessarily UK jobs, but they've been in Israel, but English speaking jobs, and that has made it harder for me. My Hebrew is quite good. I mean, it's not bad, but it would be a lot better, I think, if I had embraced it more. And I think work is the really, you see it with kids in school. That's the way they pick it up. I think from an adult perspective, all puns obviously great and it can help you a bit, but I think the best way to learn it is by speaking it. And not being afraid. So I think someone else mentioned not being afraid of making mistakes. I think for me, it's just about jumping into the Hebrew a bit more rather than sort of keeping, in my comfort zone in English. And I think that would have really helped. But my Hebrew is all right, so that's the one positive. But I think it'd be a lot better if I would have embraced it. And even in situations, for example, now when I'm working with Israeli clients, I usually speak to them in English because their English is very good. But obviously they speak Hebrew better than they speak English, so I could also speak to them in Hebrew.
Right.
So it's just I think there's that element. So I'd encourage people to, as far as they can. Obviously, you've got to do it in your own way and in your own style. But as far as you can, to really sort of try and speak that Hebrew and not be scared of making mistakes. So just make sure you practice, and it'll be the best way to improve.
Dalia?
I'm trying to think. I mean, Carmel kind of stole my idea, but yeah. I think obviously, we all went through kind of the COVID with our children and kind of telling them obviously to, stick on their Zooms and just, shouting at them for just getting up out of bed in the morning and things like that. I think that I mean, I've never actually, I think when I was 23, I worked for somebody for a year and a half when I did my stage, but then I've always been an entrepreneur and I've always worked for myself. I think working, with a team of my employees and going through a lot of what we've had to go through. I think, especially since kind of, everything. We've had the COVID, and then afterwards, obviously, we've had October 7th, and then we've had the war, and I think a lot of it is all to do with just really, really talking to each other, being very open, being very, very just admitting kind of what you're going through, and listening to each other in the office. Some people are going through much, much harder things. I mean, I was having a go at one of my employees yesterday for not being on the Zoom, and then I just realized that actually he lives in Bnei Brak, and that's just happened to be like one of the worst places obviously to be hit, and he's just just physically exhausted running 4 flights of stairs kind of downstairs every single day and back and forth. And I realized, okay, we have to this is our life, and it's important for me, obviously my employees in the office, and so I think that's something that obviously every single day we have to think about. We don't know why somebody just drove 200 miles an hour down and cut us off in the road, because maybe they're going through something really, really difficult. And it's a tough time right now. And we just all have to kind of keep an open mind.
Thank you. And lastly, Constance.
So my husband and I, we rent a flat in Tel Aviv, and at the time we came out in September to basically do a recce because we thought actually it'd be much easier when we do make Aliyah to know where we're moving to. And we did find a flat. It did mean that we had to sign it a month early because in Israel, everything moves pretty quickly. So if you find something, they kind of expect you to rent it straight away. And a piece of advice that I'd been given by a friend was make sure that where you're staying has a mamad. And at the time, I thought, no, it'll be fine. It ends up being fine. I go to the kind of public shelter, which is a minute away, and actually we've made some good friends. But it's one of those things that there is just the reality of living in Israel, and you never know what's around the corner. And actually, if that's the only thing that I would have done differently, it's not that big of a thing. But yeah, that's what I'd say.
Yeah, everyone needs a mamad at the moment. A mamad is a shelter, like a room, a reinforced room that protects us from missiles. On that note, I'm very grateful that we didn't get a siren interruption on this webinar, which we were all a little bit apprehensive about. And I'd like to thank Shimon and Dalia and Carmel and Constance for your time, and to remind everyone that we will send out like a crib sheet, and there'll be a recording with a YouTube link as well. So we'll put that together and we'll send out to everyone here and to everyone who's registered. And a last plug is that this is obviously part of a three-part series. This is the first, Monday, 29th, still before Pesach, amazingly. We have got one on assets. Those who have got assets in the UK and working out what they might want to do if they're moving with them or without, or what to do with them. That's making Aliyah with assets. And then at the end of April, when hopefully everything will be calm and we'll have won the war, we're hoping we're gonna be focusing on businesses. Those who are running businesses from the UK, have got business in the UK and are looking to make Aliyah and how to run them. And Shimon and Dalia will be with us on that webinar. Dalia will also be with us on Monday. So I guess it's just thank you to everybody who attended, and we hope to see all of you in Israel soon.
Thank you very much, Francesca.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Thanks.